once they clear and the sun comes out once again. It'll be a very windy evening for the time of year in Northern Ireland. More persistent rain will continue in the west, whilst the east will see some sunny spells. Overnight it will remain clear in the east, but further west it'll turn much wetter again and the winds will pick up too. That's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome along to Neil Oliver Live on GB News TV and on radio. Tonight, as the rest of us struggle with the cost of living, many executives have no such concerns. We'll be debating whether they are entitled to earn such huge sums. As Whitby residents vote to restrict second home ownership, I'll be joined by a local business owner to discuss the move. This week's Great Britain is the foster carer and disability rights activist Michael Atwell-Bryce. All of that and much more coming up. But first, an update on the latest news from Polly.
Neil, thank you. Good evening. The Prime Minister has hailed an inspiring and uplifting few days in Rwanda. That comes as the UK announces plans to support marginalised groups abroad and help tackle global challenges. Following a double by-election defeat, Boris Johnson continues to defend his leadership after responding to recent criticisms. He says voters want to hear more about issues that affect them and less about any mistakes he may have made.
Things are tough. Of course, people are going to rightly going to direct their frustration, their irritation at government and at me. I'm the leader of the government. I think, to be absolutely clear, in the last few months, people in Tiverton, people in Wakefield just heard far too much about stuff they didn't want to be hearing about, and not enough about what we want to do to take the country forward.
Meanwhile, Labour's Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey told GB News the public wants Mr Johnson to go.
I'd spent a lot of time campaigning in Wakefield, very struck by the level of disgust and discontent as people, I think, have seen through Boris Johnson and have lost confidence in the Conservatives doing the basic job of government now. And so it's our job in opposition until the next election to try and hold them to account and offer some of the plans that would make a difference, including on the cost of living, that we're just not seeing from the government itself.
In other news today, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says the railway industry needs to move with the times. On the third day of walkouts disrupting transport right across the country. A fifth of train services are still running today as thousands of workers protest over jobs, pay and conditions. The RMT boss, Mick Lynch, says there could be further strikes this summer if an agreement isn't reached.
We're not going to name dates immediately. And we're going to continue working constructively with the companies to try and get a deal. But that is a really steep challenge at the moment. And it hurts our people because they've lost their wages. We don't want that to happen. So if Grant Shapps wants to be constructive, that's what he can do. It's up to him what his disposition is. I'll work with Grant Shapps or anyone else that's got something constructive to say in this dispute.
To the United States now, where President Joe Biden has signed a historic new gun laws into legislation into law. Republicans and Democrats agreed a deal following the Texas school massacre and a string of other mass shootings in America. The new measures strengthen background checks for the youngest buyers of weapons and increase funding for mental health and school safety programs. President Biden says he praises the bill, but it doesn't go far enough.
For the shootings that happen every day in the streets that are mass shootings we don't even hear about, the number of people killed every day in the streets, their message to us was do something. I don't know how many times we heard that. Just do something. For God's sake, just do something. Well, today we did. While this bill doesn't do everything I want, it does include actions I've long called for that are going to save lives.
Meanwhile, Norway has raised its terror threat level after the deadly shooting overnight at a gay nightclub in Oslo. 2 people died and 21 others are hurt. Officers say the 42-year-old man is in custody and is a radicalised Islamist with a long history of violence. The shooting happened just hours before the city's Pride Parade, which organisers have since cancelled. But despite that, thousands of people are still marching near where the incident happened, waving rainbow flags. Ukrainian authorities say Russian forces have taken full control of the eastern city of Severodonetsk. It's Ukraine's biggest defeat in the war after the city suffered weeks of bombardment. Most of the Luhansk region is now under Russian control. UK intelligence chiefs also believe President Putin has replaced several generals since the start of the war, including the commander of airborne forces. And here, Armed Forces Day today has been marked up and down the country, including with a display from the RAF's Red Arrows. And earlier, the HMS Prince of Wales returned to Portsmouth Naval Base after completing NATO exercises off the Spanish coast. These were the scenes in Scarborough today, right on the beach. And the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have marked the day by paying tribute to the men and women who've served their country, both in the UK and across the world. Lastly, Sir Paul McCartney will make history later when he becomes Glastonbury Festival's oldest solo headliner. The former Beatle will take to the stage exactly 1 week after celebrating his 80th birthday. His set is expected to attract an especially large crowd with hits from throughout his career. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. Now it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
In the USA, they're jabbing babies with the COVID vaccines, 6 months old and upwards. Here in Britain, the NHS has been targeting children at primary school, 5 to 11 years old, with posters and letters depicting those youngsters who submit to the procedure as superheroes, smiling cartoon characters, children in superhero outfits, surely designed to persuade children as young as 5 years old that they might join the ranks of superheroes if they will just line up and bare an arm to the needle. Looking for all the world like an invitation to a party with large writing in bright colours, child superhero branding and headlined "Calling all superhero kids," the blatant attempt to appeal to the fantasies of innocent children is clear. The inference to be drawn by any child looking at such a poster is that they are lesser mortals, cowards even, if they would rather not take the jab. That the NHS is targeting our youngest and most vulnerable in this way is, I say, morally reprehensible, unforgivable. Where in this shameful play on childish imaginations and urge to please is the compliance demanded by the laws and ethical codes for informed consent, the necessary full disclosure of risks, benefits and alternatives? And that's before we get to Advertising Standards Agency's rules shaped to protect children from advertisers' tricks. Among much else, it has long been the case that advertisers are not, when targeting children directly and specifically, to take advantage of, and I quote from the ASA rules, their credulity, loyalty, vulnerability, or lack of experience. Last week on this channel, Mark Stein drew attention to figures used by the JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, that estimated how many children would need to be jabbed in order to stop one person, just one person, being admitted to an intensive care unit with COVID. That figure is 2 million children, each jabbed not once but twice, to stop one admission to ICU. The average age of death from COVID, calculated early on in the pandemic, was 82 years, the same age as national life expectancy, or even older. In the last 3 months, that figure for average age at death from COVID has risen to 85 or 86 years of age. How many grandparents and great-grandparents would countenance the injection of 5-year-olds, and who knows, if we follow the lead set by the USA, perhaps 6-month-old babies, to protect those elders from any disease up to and including the Black Death? My hunch is not many. So far, only 9% of youngsters in the UK aged between 5 and 11 have taken the jab, so that all is not lost. Not yet, at least. Remember anyway that it's estimated 3/4 of British children have had COVID already, and so have natural immunity. And that much is before we come to contemplate the increasing certainty that the vaccines are anyway causing deaths and harms of all kinds and in huge numbers. Long behind us now are the days when anyone could say any of the jabs prevent infection with COVID or transmission of COVID. Last gasp claims that the vaccines reduce the risk of severe symptoms and therefore hospitalisation are similarly undermined. But the internet is still awash with people, from the President of the United States on down, saying that if you take the jabs you won't catch COVID, that you won't transmit COVID, that you won't die of COVID. By any sane person's assessment, that's COVID misinformation. And yet the so-called fact-checkers, paid for by billionaire technocrats and the media platforms themselves, leave those erroneous nonsense statements untouched while continuing to censor and delete reports of death and harm. Health Secretary Sajid Javid bragged last week that those vaccines we've had forced upon us so far are just the start. He tweeted that NHS patients would benefit from the next generation of vaccines thanks to a new deal with Moderna, a state-of-the-art mRNA manufacturing and global research and development centre will be built here in the UK. According to Javid, it will cement our science superpower status. So it's not just 5-year-olds who are supposed to swoon at the prospect of superpowers. While our Health Secretary celebrates a new deal with Big Pharma, let us consider the latest figures from the VAERS, Voluntary Adverse Event Reporting System in the United States. The latest data released by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed 1,301,356 reports of adverse events experienced by all age groups after vaccination. Remember too that it's a crime in the US to log false claims on the VAERS system so that medics put their reputations on the line with every posting and are highly unlikely, to say the very least, to report nuisance or other likely erroneous claims of hurt. Among that figure are 28,859 reports of deaths and 238,412 of serious injuries between December 14, 2020 and June 10, 2022. And yet now, while the figures rise, concerning the risks associated with the present vaccines, while compensation is beginning to be paid out to victims' families here in Britain, and while so much still remains unknown about the safety of mRNA vaccines, we are already invited by our Health Secretary to look forward to more of the same. I said on this channel months ago that they should leave the children alone, but in my heart I knew they wouldn't, and they haven't. These 2 years past have not been about taking care of people's health. They've been about and continue to be about seizing and exploiting the control of the people themselves. COVID was used as a key and it unlocked a door. We've been isolated, divided and placed under house arrest. Many have had their livelihoods destroyed. We've been made to watch the economy driven off a cliff. We've had our travel privileges revoked. We've had our physical and mental health pushed to breaking point and beyond. Just as COVID ran out of steam, war broke out in Europe, a war with no end anywhere in sight. Now they're telling us to once and for all bid farewell to coal, gas and oil to heat our homes and power our cars. Everything everywhere is divisive, frightening, enraging, or a mix of all three. Apparently unstoppable illegal immigration on the southern coastline, fuel shortages, price hikes of hundreds of % at a time, the prospect of a summer of industrial action, travel chaos for millions. Most recently, the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the United States and more riots in response. Division, division, division. Take a breath and look at all of it. The fury and the hopeless impotence felt by millions of people is setting us at each other's throats in every way imaginable. Like water flowing into cracks and fissures in rock, the fear must one day create so much pressure that the rock shatters. The more divided we become, the better it suits the agenda of those that would have us forget the world of before and just bend over ready to take it from the new world to come. I say it will only get worse. COVID might as well be viewed as a dry run, or perhaps more accurately as an opportunity to probe defences in the minds of the public and so gauge reactions in preparation for the next more determined assault. Isolated, frightened and angry people, cut off from work and social lives, trapped in their homes for weeks and months, turned to the internet as a means to reach out to others, to find information different from the paid-for propaganda pumped out by the government and servile media outlets. And what do we see now? An online safety bill. This, we're told, will clear out all of that pesky misinformation and disinformation, which is to say information the government doesn't like people seeing and hearing because it runs counter to official stories. How very, very convenient. As one door closes, another one is slammed in our faces. All over the world, under the cover of COVID darkness, new laws were passed in one country after another to limit the possibility of protest and dissent. President Biden is already warning about the next pandemic. There's monkeypox, or whatever they decide to call it next, and most recently the discovery of polio in a British sewer. If they don't seek to curtail yet more of our freedoms in response to a disease, they will surely try to have us submit to restrictions designed to save the planet, or stop the war in Ukraine, or whatever cause they can drum up next. And now, as was always inevitable, and that could be seen from outer space if you have your eyes open, it comes down to our children. Adults have had some time to work things out for themselves, to take advantage of understanding and experience spread over years. The brains of children are much more malleable, however, ready for imprinting and indoctrination. I've long wondered just how safe British schools are for our children anymore. This latest scam by the NHS, calling all superhero kids, is only another glimpse among too many to mention of the enthusiasm for abandoning the need to teach children how to think and telling them what to think instead, what to do. Look closely now and you can see another escape route for the uncooperative, the independently minded being prepared for closure. For those uncomfortable with the education their children are receiving from their schools, homeschooling has been an option. Away from an agenda pushed by the state, homeschooling parents and guardians were free to nurture and encourage young minds in other ways. Last month, the government announced a new bill to, and I quote, level up education. One way or another, I suspect there will be more control exerted over homeschoolers, tendrils of control tightening, because this is about control, pure and simple. It's about frightening people and keeping them frightened, and so infinitely more likely to take their medicine, real medicine, or perhaps the cure for climate crisis, however bitter, who knows. More and more, it will be about our children, their hearts and minds. The final obstacle to any totalitarian is always the family and the protection afforded to children by their families. They were always going to try and reach the children in the end. Whatever happens next, or indeed does not and must not happen next, is up to every one of us. All of that's my opinion, of course, and you're free to disagree. Keep your tweets and emails coming all through the show. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me as well @gbnews, and I'll try to get to some of your comments later in the show if time allows. Tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist and broadcaster Ingrid Tarrant, a familiar face, here in this studio at least, and the filmmaker Kerry Dingle. Ingrid, what did you think of my opening remarks, specifically in relation to vaccinating children?
Specifically in relation to vaccinating children, absolutely a big no-no. And you also mentioned with the age group and grandparents and what would their take be on it. Well, I am a grandmother to 4 grandchildren. And absolutely, if there was any question, I would just go, don't have the jab. Don't be frightened that by not having the jab, you're going to kill me, because it won't. Just believe me, just trust me. But, you know, that message is not getting through to a lot of people. And what I really hate, and it's all this superhero status and everything, exactly what you're saying. It's playing on the minds of, it's not the reality. But it reminds me of, do you remember all the cereals with all the little exciting little things that they had inside? In fact, they had to move them higher up because parents were tempted by, oh, mummy, please buy that cereal, even if they don't want to eat it because of the contents of it. It's the same sort of thing, but also with those cards where in the playground, if you didn't have the card, you couldn't trade with your friends. So they are creating a peer pressure amongst those children. As you quite rightly say, they're not independent thinking, but the independent thinking parents, grandparents, teachers, because they're not going to intercept really, because that's somewhere along the line it's going to be in their interest. They're just not getting it. And that's what is very frightening, terrifying.
Kerry, what do you think of deliberately, and coming from a body like the NHS, deliberately playing on the way children's minds work, which is to be fascinated by the thought of superheroes, which is to want to be in with the in crowd. What do you think about that kind of manipulation?
I think it's terrible, and I do think that it's going to create children who are seen, and families who are seen as pariah-like for not going along with it. And I do think that, you know, there is absolutely an age of consent discussion to be had, and parents should absolutely have a final say in this. However, what I don't understand, and I'm not sure I agree with you on, is I don't see that there's a sort of government conspiracy to kill off kids or anything like that. I think it's wrongly well-meaning, and just as we've seen the terrifyingly wrongly well-meaning and disastrous effects of lockdown, and it is weird that they've denied kids almost 2 years education in schools and blamed people who aren't able to do homeschooling in a crowded flat on a 14th floor of a tower block, who haven't got the internet and PCs, blame them for the fact their kids can't even speak now. You know, and that's what I notice with the young people I work with. There's been a huge number just haven't been able to progress at all in the last few years.
You say well-meaning, but the statistics show that to keep one person out of ICU, you need to jab 2 million kids.
I agree with you, it's mad.
Now, in what way is that well-meaning, or is that just bloody mindedness? When are they going, and there's only been a 9%...
But is that the motivation, Neil? You're saying it's all about control, and you're right, that control freaks abound. There's no doubt about it, and we've had
money.
2 years...
Don't forget there's huge
and profitability, and we've had 2 years of very authoritarian control over all of us that far too many people have given into, tragically. But I don't quite get the conspiracy to commit or to annihilate kids. I don't see it there. You know what I mean? It just sounds too conspiratorial as opposed to yet another botched, over-the-top reaction to a disease they are too fearful of, and they don't trust us to make decisions.
Carry on.
I just wanted to say, really, Kerry, that so far it has been proven, and as you were saying in your monologue as well, these platforms are being shut down, and we're not allowed to say reveal our findings because it goes against what we are taught and brainwashed to believe. But the thing is, there is absolute proof that it hasn't been effective. And also, quite apart from that, children don't need to be vaccinated anyway against this because they have a natural immune system. And as you said as well, Neil, and most of the children, 70%, I think you said, have actually had it. So they've got the natural antibodies in there. It's about money as well, and it's control. But I think a lot of it is to do with the money side of it, because they are just making a fortune out of this. And I presume that they've got a lot of batches that they need to get rid of. There's a shelf life, because there wasn't such a big take-up with the third and fourth jabs. In any case, I don't know. But, I mean, it does sound conspiratorial, but there's something going on. It'll be revealed.
I'm just hopeful that because there's only been a 9% take-up, that suggests that people are voting with their feet, so to speak.
And their arms.
And that parents are deciding for themselves what they will and will not do. And that downward spiral that there's been of uptake of vaccines, I think, well, it seems hopeful to me. After the break, while most of us are dealing with a cost of living crisis, many company executives are doing better than ever before. Can that be right? We'll debate the issue coming up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. While a cost of living crisis grows deeper by the day, together with the prospect of industrial action spreading from one industry to another, fat cat bosses, so-called, have never had it so good. Network Rail chief Andrew Haynes earns nearly 20 times more than a striking train guard. BT Group chief Philip Jansen's £3.5 million in pay and perks was as much as 97 times as much as the salary of his lowest paid staff member. And workers there are talking about striking for the first time in 35 years. At Royal Mail, British Airways, Stagecoach Group and First Group, the story is similar. Massive differences between the pay for the boss and the staff, and talk of strike in the air. I'm joined now by Ryan Mark Parsons, a veteran of TV show The Apprentice. Good evening, Ryan.
Evening.
And we're also joined down the line, I think, by Steffi Curran from Punk Against Poverty, a group working, amongst other things, to help families struggling with poverty. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining me. Ryan, first of all, do you understand the outrage felt by many when they hear about a disparity on that scale, nearly 100 times of a difference between the boss and the lowest paid worker?
Yes, of course, I understand the outrage, but also I would like to say that I've always been motivated to achieve success and to make as much money as possible. Coming from The Apprentice, having my own business, I've always been inherently motivated to do well, and I don't think that's something we should discourage. Of course, there will always be wage disparities, but when it comes to bosses making more money than the workers, naturally the disposition, the mentality, the talent that the bosses possess sort of deserve the wage that they earn. And you can see that around the world with the likes of Elon Musk and the train bosses that we're referencing here. I believe they deserve the pay, and I think it serves as great motivation to people like me, young people. I'm 22. I look up to these people.
I can understand that, and I think, apart from anything else, I think it's almost inevitable in a free market. But Steffi, are you seeing more people struggling in recent years? I suppose, really, I mean, in the past couple of years.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The demand for our services and other partner organisations that we work with has just gone through the roof. You know, we know that the cost of living's gone up massively. People are struggling more than ever. I've just lost a volunteer from our organisation who's a pensioner who's had to go back to paid work because she can't afford her bills. You know, this is what we're seeing, is that, you know, things are really, really tough for people.
And do you think that the disparity, you know, the idea of bosses earning, you know, 80, 90, 100 times more than their lowest paid staff, is that just inevitable in a free market?
I don't think it has to be, no. I mean, I absolutely agree that, of course, a boss is going to earn more than somebody at entry-level position. And I completely agree with Ryan Mark that, you know, you need something to achieve, to work towards and aspire to reach that level. However, I do think it's very much a false economy, paying workers so much less. You know, when you've got some of the lower level workers having to work free jobs, so they're coming into work exhausted, they're not at their best, you know, or they're at work and they're worrying about leaving on time so they can get to the food bank queue, or how are they going to feed the kids tonight? You're not going to get the best out of workers, especially if they know that the wage gap is so immense. It's, you know, how can you motivate people if you're at the top and they are struggling so much at the bottom, as many people are right now?
What about that, Ryan? What say you? How do you motivate people? I hear what you're saying about, you know, the best paid, the most successful being, you know, inspirational figures for entrepreneurs like yourself. But what do we say to people who can't pay bills and they're looking and they're within organisations where the boss is stratospherically removed from them?
Well, I see two sides of the coin. Of course, I think government intervention is necessary when it comes to, for example, energy and the rises we've seen there. Social tariffs could be introduced to make it slightly easier for people who are struggling when it comes to their salary. But at the same time, I've always said this, I've said this amongst friends also in business, people my age, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, or if you don't believe you're earning enough in terms of what you're doing day to day, then there's also alternatives. And I've always had that mantra growing up. My parents taught me that if I'm not earning enough, I want to be earning more. If I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, then I would seek something else. And I think promoting that tenacious mindset of driving for higher wages, if you're not satisfied with what you're earning, I think is something that we should be promoting.
Is there, can you find something that you agree with in that, Steffi, that people can vote with their feet once again, can take themselves away from unsatisfactory situations, or is that a pipe dream?
I mean, of course, some people can, without a doubt. You know, it is possible for some people, but for many, it's not. Finding other options isn't always that easy. You know, it's great if you come from a public school education, you know, you've got university degrees behind you, you've got work experience, you've got options then. But if you don't have those privileges, things can be very hard. I mean, expecting people to apply for a job if they don't have access to the internet or they don't have a phone, that becomes very, very difficult. That limits your options. And even just motivating yourself when, as I say, you know, you can't sleep at night because you don't know how to put the heating on. How can you then motivate yourself and really find it in yourself to kind of go there if you're in such a bad place? And this is the problem, is so many people's mental health is being affected by their living conditions, that trying to find that inspiration is really hard when you're right at rock bottom. Some people do find it, but many just struggle and can't see a way out. And it's really, really hard for them right now. And I do think that, you know, it's a lovely ideal that, if I'm not happy, I'll just find a different job. But the reality is it's not always possible. Some people are very limited in their options. And also some people are scared of change too. You know, if they're struggling to pay the bills, how will another job be any better? You know, how will changing this situation really be any better? It's very, very hard for people. Change is not always easy when you've got mouths to feed and bills to pay. You know, if you change jobs, you've got to go a month without getting paid. That's not easy, you know.
What did you make, Steffi, of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's claim that workers could be the cause of the inflation problem by demanding higher wages?
I mean, it's typical Boris. Blame the people at the bottom, ignore the issues at the top. It wasn't unexpected to hear that from him. It certainly wasn't something I would agree with.
Ryan, what did you make of that? I have to say, I thought it took some breathtaking gall in the midst of a cost of living crisis that's only just begun to suggest to people who already can't afford their bills that if they asked for more money, they'd be the cause of the problem.
Well, I think it's a very complicated scenario right now. I mean, I totally concede as well that, look, if you have workers matching the rate of inflation, which is currently at 9%, you will have what we experienced in the 1970s, a wage price spiral, and then inflation goes into double digits. So I see it as a very complicated situation in terms of rectifying exactly what we can do to sort of support the demands of workers, like we have Mick Lynch advocating for higher wages for rail workers, but at the same time, we could see then inflation rising to what it already is at 9%, potentially going up to double figures. I think that has to be a consideration at the same time.
Steffi, I do genuinely wonder, you know, we've heard this story over and over again. Throughout my adult life, there's been stories about fat cat bosses and the people struggling at the bottom of the pyramid. But there's an end of times feeling at the moment. I wonder if eventually, as a society, as an economy, we finally reach a breaking point where for too many people, the status quo cannot sustain.
I think we're very, very close to that breaking point. A lot of the people that we're meeting through my organisation, I say their mental health has been massively affected for the first time ever. They've always struggled. They used to struggle. They grew up poor. They're still poor. But this is a next level crisis. And yeah, we're at absolute breaking point. We've seen people in the past freeze to death in their homes, and elderly people. You know, it's only going to get worse. And it's how long do we go on just turning a blind eye before things really, really collapse?
A grim prospect. Steffi Curran from Punk Against Poverty, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I can turn to you guys on the couch. Kerry, what do you make of it? As I say, I was particularly struck by Boris Johnson. And managing to suggest that the breaking point, the straw that breaks the camel's back, was going to be poor people asking for a pay rise.
Well, it's outrageous economic ignorance, apart from anything else. It simply isn't true that wage rises cause inflation. Wage rises are a necessary offset to inflation for people in order to get by, and inflation is far more a product of the paucity of economic growth and lower levels of productivity, along with, the global trends, war and other pressures in terms of trade that we've seen. So it's way off the mark and outrageous. But I have to say, I would like to respond to Ryan Mark's points, because I find that so supercilious, Mark, that you somehow assume that you are more motivated and of a disposition that puts you of a mind to earn better and to get a better job. I think you are being quite contemptuous of millions, those who do your Amazon deliveries on 0 hours contracts, and, millions of workers who work for very, very little. I do think that attacking the fat cats is a waste of time, even though it's always the fat cats who come out and say, damn the workers and, damn the rail workers, who, thank goodness for the rail workers, fighting for more for themselves. And I hope many, many more workers follow suit. But I do think damning the fat cats doesn't help us, because it says that somehow being rich is bad. Whereas the charity I run, the slogan has always been Ferraris for all. We want everyone to be rich and to get more, but Ryan's attitude and the fat cat attitude and Boris certainly won't get us there.
I have to let you respond to that, Ryan. What do you say to an allegation of being contemptuous towards the typical working person?
Well, I mean, I don't think everyone's going to get a Ferrari. I think that's just a fact of life. There are people that are more intelligent, more capable to uphold higher positions in any corporations. You're suggesting that...
I'm suggesting that people who do the crappiest jobs should be paid the most. Really? Whereas you think, Kushti, that other people who do all the dirty work should be on low wages.
But the people that do the dirty work might not necessarily have the capabilities to do what the bosses do. Are you suggesting that a cleaner would have the same abilities as someone like Elon Musk running Tesla and other organisations?
I think a cleaner who's also a mum, and you'll find is a nursery worker and everything else under the sun, has got incredible competencies and certainly should be paid double what they are now. Absolutely.
Ingrid, is this just a story that's on a kind of an eternal loop? Do we just run around the hamster wheel on this one? Or is there any way out of it, any way off of the wheel?
I don't know, because we're on the wheel. And unless we stop something and put a spoke in it for further down the line. It is really an interesting situation with these figures, but I just want to throw into this, which is quite strange, because to bring Boris's attitude back into it, he's on 164,000 a year. Now, the other people that you were talking about, the Rail Chief CEO, he's on over 500,000. The Royal Mail, he's on 750,000. Sean Doyle, the CEO of BA, he's on 848 million. And Boris is saying this, and he's on 164,000 a year, which actually is only made up of an extra 80,000 for being PM. Now, it's distorted, because I think for a man to be running a country, or a woman, anybody to be running the whole country that has all these people and CEOs under them that somehow has to go into the mix in the economy is worth a lot more than the CEOs of these other companies. But they are way overpaid, and it should be distributed amongst workers. Do you know, we would never have survived, none of us. You're quite right, with the people of Amazon. I was so grateful every time they delivered something to the door. Honestly, I know. And the supermarket deliveries, they kept going. And I thought, this is amazing, absolutely amazing. And they weren't recognised. And when the nurses were asking for the 2% wage rise, and they were saying, no, you can only have 1%. And I felt that was right, but I felt at that point, well, actually, the nurses were doing a brilliant job, but so were Amazon, so were the people in the supermarket. Yes. So I think we've got to recognise what they mean, their value to us to keep the nation going and oiling the wheels, not necessarily their intelligence, their input.
It's fair to say, isn't it, though, Ryan? I hear what you're saying about exceptional people being able to demand exceptional wages.
Yeah.
But wasn't it the case, during lockdown in particular, that we saw, as though illuminated by a bright light, who were actually keeping the people fed, the deliveries arriving at their depots or at people's front doors, and that we could see, who was actually keeping the country moving?
Well, I'm not discrediting that the nurses, the Amazon delivery workers, etc., aren't working hard, and of course I appreciate them just as much as everyone here. But what I don't like is this sort of generic condemnation of people earning more money, because I feel that is through hard work, and that's something that we should teach
how can you
young
justify
people.
nearly £1 million for these people that actually you don't see? It's all invisible. They're just sitting there, and somehow they have all these minions.
Well, how do you think they got there? Through hard work? I mean...
Yes, and they probably have got an ability to, perhaps a little bit more intelligence, perhaps they've got some sort of like strategic skills and stuff like that. But I cannot see how you can justify it all the same.
I just think it's a cynical approach to assume it's nepotistic or anything like that, and
No,
it's sort
it's
of
not
underhand.
nepotistic,
I think you can actually just say in black and white that perhaps these people did work hard, because I would like to get to a position maybe on their salaries, and I wouldn't want someone like you criticising my hard work and saying, well, I actually don't deserve what I earn.
But this comes out of the coffers.
What are you earning? Do you believe that you earn a justifiable amount? Would you like someone watching this show at home to say that she doesn't deserve to earn what you earn?
Well, I wouldn't
do you believe
to think
you
that
work
because
hard?
I do extremely hard. I work sort of like 80, 90 hours a week. I work at weekends.
Well, there will be people at home watching the show earning less than you. And
yes,
they might be
they're probably
screaming
doing
at the
100
TV.
hours. But I know...
So what, do they deserve more than you?
I think it's all on ability, but what I'm saying...
That's exactly what I'm saying.
No,
So
but
you agree
this...
with me?
no, I don't.
Because the bosses, I think, earn on ability.
I disagree with you.
Honestly, a debate that will clearly run. Ryan Mark Parsons, veteran of The Apprentice, you've earned some more stripes taking blows this evening. Thank you for joining us. Have to move to a break, though. After which, are second home owners a positive or a negative for holiday towns? We'll be discussing this issue after residents of Whitby voted in new measures to restrict second home ownership. Stay with us.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Homes by the sea are the dream for ever more people. The past 2 years of working from home saw a marked increase in the number of people looking to escape the madding crowd of cities and other urban areas. But every house acquired as a second home is, according to critics, one more put beyond the reach of locals, who often cannot compete with the purchasing power of city dwellers. To take the example of Whitby in North Yorkshire, in 2021, nearly 20% of homes in the much-loved seaside town were second homes or holiday lets. That was more than double the figure 20 years ago. Earlier this month, an unusual referendum was held in the town, And of 2,268 residents who took part, a whopping 2,111 said they'd like to see all new build housing set aside for full-time primary residency. Joining me now is Peter Croft, a Whitby resident and business owner. Good evening, Peter. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Neil.
It's a difficult one. Does that referendum, unofficial and non-binding, though I understand it to have been, does it nonetheless give a fair sense of local feeling towards second homes and the owners thereof?
Yeah, I do think that what you've got to understand is that really in some ways the town poll was called by a group of people who literally felt as though nobody was listening. We could see the town changing around ourselves, and effectively the Borough Council, local politicians didn't get a grasp of what was going on, and they're now starting to listen to the concerns of Whitby people. And what I would say, Neil, is it isn't just a case of the Whitby people don't want people to come to Whitby. What we want is balance. And what the townspeople need are affordable homes. What you've got to understand is that Whitby is one of the only towns in the UK which is actually surrounded by a national park, but isn't part of it. So we've only got so much land in it that we can actually build on. Recently, playing fields have been built on. The council are looking at building on verges. There is this feeling that the resource of land for building new homes is disappearing. Not only that, you know, if those new builds, and there have been some projects recently in Whitby which were classed as affordable housing for locals, population of around 13,000, average salary around 18,000 a year. A lot of those local homes that were classed as affordable dwellings for local people, we're now finding being flipped into second homes or holiday lets. And this is a small basis. We're seeing this across.
We're having a few problems with Peter's sound and vision there, so I'll open this up to the panel. Kerry, you can understand it, can't you? And it's not just Whitby, it's all over Cornwall, St Ives especially, but all over that county. It's not even by the sea necessarily, the Cotswolds, the Lake District, Brighton by the sea. What is the answer to enable people who need to be where they are, who need to be in their hometown on fairly low pay, to be able to get on the property market?
I'm completely sympathetic to the Whitby residents. I think you have to be very, hard-nosed not to be. But I do think it's a potential minefield, because there will be Whitby residents who want to rent, who need to sell, who maybe need to move to a bigger city or to family as they get old, all sorts of reasons. So I think it's a minefield. And I know what your man there was saying about Whitby. I do know Whitby. I mean, I've only been there for the beach, like you do, because my husband's from Leeds, and so it's not that far. But I would say the problem is that doesn't solve the lack of housing or the lack of building. I would see the onerous planning legislation that surrounds more greenfield sites, and we should remember only 10% of Britain is actually built on. The rest of it falls under some categorisation of something to be conserved and preserved. So there is a ludicrous concentration.
But even if you build houses, how do you stop market forces dictating that those with the most money, who might be from out with the locale?
Well, you have to massively build. That's the truth of it, because scarcity drives up the prices. And obviously then there's also foreign investors, although that's been knocked into touch recently. But it is definitely the case that the slowdown in the build in the last 10, 20 years is what has massively driven up house prices and made them wholly unaffordable for local people. So we might have reached a thing where it's very difficult to get out of that now. But I'm not convinced, sadly, that having some sort of you were born here, you can have this, you know, where you show your passport and your ancestry to access a home is a way forward.
Ingrid, I wonder as well, or slightly off on a tangent, that are we seeing a move away from the city living and the urban living? I don't know if it was, I don't know if lockdown and whatever, working from home was the trigger, but do you think there's a societal shift that's going to put more people into areas which were, you know, otherwise
definitely.
off limits?
And it was lockdown because people realised they could work from home and they could be anywhere. They could even be abroad. And the weather was so beautiful, wasn't it? And I'm thinking, here we are, we're stuck with like not even a garden in some cases.
Weren't allowed to go to the beach.
You get more value for money. But I just want to bring into, because I've just been was in Baslow last night, and it's a gorgeous little village in Derbyshire. I've never been there at all. And funnily enough, I had this conversation with a girl that was there, a young girl, recently divorced with 2 children. And she was saying, because it's such a beautiful place, so many people come there. That's not coastal, it's just a wonderful escape. So they've bought second homes there, which means that it's unaffordable for her. So it comes back to that problem. But, you know, you were talking about the foreign investors and how they've done that. And that is perhaps a way of doing it. Because I remember when the Battersea Power Station came on sale, and they were pre-sales, and they gave, I can't remember exactly, I might have got this wrong, but I think there was a month in which citizens of the UK could put their bids in and then sell whatever they could first, so they had priority before they allowed the foreign investors in. And perhaps that's a way to do it. But, you know, the interesting thing, what David was saying as well, is they haven't got that much land, and they want to preserve the land that they have anyway and not build on it. And it's a huge margin, over 2,100 something against 157. They're just saying, no, we don't want this to happen. We don't want the, you know, playing fields to go, the green fields, what the few that they've got left. And there's going to be a move anyway because people are working from home. So you get the available space. I don't think we need to build more. So, no, I really don't. Honestly, Kerry, there's so many empty office spaces now.
It's such a problem. I mean, there's a coastal village that my family and I visit, an hour's drive away from where we live, and the same thing is happening there. In the winter time, it's a relative ghost town, very small permanent population, because most of the houses have been acquired as second homes and all the rest of it. And again, we hear the stories of people who want to live there, who are born there, want to be able to stay there. Is it just a harsh fact of life that they can't? Is there no way to make it possible for people with commitments in the local area to have access to something that high-paying, thicker-walleted people from outside can't get access to?
I think we still... I'd like to know what you think should happen, Neil, on that. I still think that unless you overall increase the stock of housing and you end some of the draconian legislation so that people in a beautiful little village can even build in their own gardens, which they can't at the moment. You know, that's such for more of their family to stay there. And some of those restrictions, based on environmental grounds or the kind of NIMBY thing, are mad. But I don't have... I really worry about this idea of that you've got to have your village passport in order to be able to get into the housing market. I think that's a worrying...
loyalty.
Well, I think it's a worry. We saw it, apartheid housing kind of projects in Tower Hamlets in the 80s, where if you weren't born there, you couldn't get a flat. And there's something doesn't quite feel right.
I do wonder. I'm thinking about your question to me, and I just see it as a very complicated situation that has, you know, the law of unintended consequences applies. If you take any seemingly simple solution to it, and I do wonder that it wouldn't, that any attempt to keep prices down for locals, is that not penalising the people who are perhaps locals themselves who want to sell?
Exactly.
You know, if you've got a property, you've come to the end of your use of it, or you're moving, you want to sell it.
You want to move.
Do you have to bite the bullet and accept that there's a threshold put on what you can sell?
Yeah, it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it, really?
And who you can sell to.
And who you can sell to. You know, because after all, it will be people from Whitby who are selling
Of course.
Whitby houses to people, whether they're from Whitby or whether they're coming in from...
The other thing as well is the economy that it brings in. OK, so in the winter months it's quite empty, but in the summer months it must be flourishing. And you do wonder, will the restaurants and pubs suffer or not realise how much they will suffer by not having that extra influx?
But, to get back to that point I was making earlier, I do wonder if there isn't a societal shift that will gradually work its way through, house ownership and property ownership right across the land. If people, for all sorts of reasons, are coming to the end of their tether with cities and with the urban life, and find that there are alternatives, and that could take generations.
Yeah, but already,
but
straight away, I mean, the housing market, it speaks for itself, because house prices in London really went down during the pandemic, whereas all houses outside of London shot up. I mean, I think that's levelling down a little bit now, but I mean, the figures really speak an awful lot for themselves. It's a difficult one. It's really a difficult one. It's all about freedom of choice, isn't it? But sort of like, when the economy and money's tight, and for locals, you start to, they get pushed out, and that's not
Well,
fair.
the inspiration to me is the old plot lands where workers went and built for themselves, and I think that's tremendously exciting.
But I get worried.
But we have such top-down, control over planning and building that's the big obstacle, I think. Why not build from London to the sea?
No.
Then we can have that life.
No, because they've got
and have massive more green spaces all the way in.
There's too many impermeable surfaces
there's a
as it
controversial
is.
thought.
And I grew up on a farm.
I'm going to jump on an excuse to go to a break for that one, after which we'll be meeting, amongst others, our Great Britain for this week.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. Coming up in the next hour, as Prince Charles visits Rwanda for the Commonwealth Summit, we ask what his future ascension to the throne will mean for the monarchy. We meet the couple who have an amazing job running a lighthouse in Massachusetts. The only negative is they don't actually get paid. And we meet the people who left everything behind them in favour of life on the road in a transit van. Well, it's a little bit better than a transit van now. That's all coming up after the news with Polly.
Neil, thank you. The latest news headlines this hour. The Prime Minister has hailed an inspiring and uplifting few days in Rwanda. That comes as the UK announces plans to support marginalised groups abroad and help tackle global challenges. Following a double by-election defeat here in the UK, Boris Johnson continues to defend his leadership after responding to recent criticisms. He says voters want to hear more about the issues that affect them and much less about any mistakes he may have made.
Things are tough. Of course, people are going to rightly going to direct their frustration, their irritation at government and at me. I'm the leader of the government. I think, to be absolutely clear, in the last few months, people in Tiverton, people in Wakefield just heard far too much about stuff they didn't want to be hearing about, and not enough about what we want to do to take the country forward.
Well, in other news today, the boss of the RMT has accused the Transport Secretary of talking nonsense after the minister tweeted what he called outdated working practices were ruining the railway industry. Grant Shapps said strikes were damaging to commuters and the economy, but Mick Lynch hasn't ruled out further industrial action. A fifth of train services have been running today on a third day of walkouts this week as thousands of rail workers protest over jobs, pay and conditions. In the United States, the President, Joe Biden, has signed in historic new gun safety legislation. Republicans and Democrats agreed a deal following the Texas school massacre and a string of other mass shootings in America. The new measures strengthen background checks for the youngest buyers of weapons and increase funding for mental health and school safety programs. Meanwhile, Norway has raised its terror threat level after the deadly shooting overnight at a gay nightclub in Oslo. 2 people died and 21 others were hurt. Officers say the 42-year-old man in custody is a radicalised Islamist with a long history of violence. The shooting happened just hours before the city's Pride Parade, which organisers have since cancelled. But despite that, thousands of people are marching near where the incident happened, waving rainbow flags. Ukrainian authorities say Russian forces have taken full control of the eastern city of Severodonetsk. It's Ukraine's biggest defeat in the war after the city suffered weeks of bombardment. Most of the Luhansk region is now under Russian control. UK intelligence chiefs believe President Putin has replaced several generals since the start of the war, including the commander of airborne forces. And here, Armed Forces Day has been marked up and down the country, including a display from the RAF's Red Arrows, who took to the skies in celebration. Earlier, the HMS Prince of Wales returned to Portsmouth Naval Base after completing NATO exercises off the Spanish coast. And if you're watching on TV, these were the scenes today in Scarborough, right by the beach, as veterans marched in front of massed crowds. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have marked the day by paying tribute to all who've served their country, both here and abroad. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, and it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
Thanks for that, Polly. Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. For what it's worth, I think we should have an Armed Forces Month to celebrate them. God bless them all, that's what I think. Before moving on, I should probably turn to responses via social media that have been coming in. Shane says, there is no scientific basis or health basis to give the jab to kids. They literally have zero risk, so why force a jab where there is zero risk? If it's not for health, then what's it for? Why are they eager to administer a jab for no reason? Doug says, I find it strange that most of the protests are coming from the older generation who seem to see the future outcome. The younger people have no idea what's coming down the line and don't seem to care anyway. I dread the future life that's being arranged for them. Mark has emailed in to say he disagrees. The best scientific minds across the world have manufactured the vaccines and they have thankfully helped us see light at the end of the tunnel. On the subject of fat cats, Kevin says, nothing will ever change regarding excessive earnings of executives. The reason is that our political elite have their snouts in the trough of these businesses and earn a small fortune from their paymasters. Your words, not mine. Now, taking care of just one child, providing love and attention might be challenge enough. During the past 2 decades, my Great Britain Tonight, Michael Atwell-Bryce, has been a foster carer for more than 50 children, many with complex needs. Michael, together with his husband Paul, recently presented with the Fostering Network's most prestigious award, which is the President's Award for Commitment to Social Care. Both Michael and Paul have made a particular contribution to promoting foster care within the LGBTQ+ community and also those from minority backgrounds. Michael takes a break from all of that to join me now. Hello, Michael, how are you doing?
Hi, Neil. Hi, Neil, are you okay?
Yes, absolutely. Tell me, what has it been like these past 2 decades looking after all of these kids?
Well, when we passed as foster carers, I was only 21. So we've been doing it a long time now. I'm nearly 40. It's been amazing. We've met some really good friends through fostering. We've also got our own 4 children as well along the way. We've met some great children, moved a lot of them on to adoption, moved some of them on to back to birth family, wherever's best for them, the best outcome for them, we've moved them back. And it's just been, we've met some great friends and other foster carers, adopters that we've moved babies and young children onto. We've met some great people through fostering, and we've had a great time with it over the past nearly 2 decades we've done it for now, but we've had a great time with it.
You were 21 when you embarked upon this. What was the inspiration to take on something rewarding, sure, but sheer hard graft at 21? Opening your life and your home to foster kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was quite mature for the age. That was one of the things in the assessment. They were wondering, would I be mature enough to deal with children? Because obviously they come from difficult backgrounds, a lot of issues sometimes, behavioural problems. They've been through a tough time with neglect and stuff. And we were settled down, myself and Paul. We'd worked, we'd got ourselves a own home, and we were quite settled. And obviously, being a same-sex couple, we looked into fostering initially just to see how we'd get on looking after children. We'd looked after his sister's children and things, but we wanted to see how we'd get on looking after other people's children, and it's turned out really well. Like I've just said, we've met some great people and met some great friends through it. And I would always say, would always recommend fostering to anybody, from 21-year-old onwards. Obviously, it's your decision, but if you are interested in it, get people out to chat to you and find out more about it.
How big is the need for foster carers in this country? I suppose really what I'm asking is how many youngsters right this moment are in need of this kind of help?
Sorry, it's really bad signal. How many children are in care?
I'm just wondering how big is the need for foster care in this country, which is to say how many kids at any given moment are really in need of foster care?
Yeah, there's always a massive shortage of foster carers all the time. That's why we do a lot with the Fostering Network and promoting new carers, because I think there's around something like 130,000 children in care in the UK at the moment, and a lot of them, obviously, the idea is to keep them out of children's homes and keep them in family homes as much as possible, because that's the key to it, to keep these children out of care, out of children's home, and keep them in family homes and in their communities where they belong. So we obviously foster in Barnsley, and Barnsley's motto is keep Barnsley children within Barnsley, so they stay in the same schools and they have close contact with the birth family and the friends and things like that. That's really important.
We're looking, while you're talking there, we're looking at fantastic images of you with some of your extended brood over the years. Fair to say as well that you haven't shied away from taking on youngsters with various complications and special needs. How has that affected your life?
So Levi and Lucas, his own 2 boys who you've just seen in the clip then, They're as old as twins. They've just turned 16. So when we first got Levi and Lucas, they weren't diagnosed with anything. And then gradually over the years, when they were 3-year-old, there were problems like with the health visits and stuff. They were diagnosed with severe autism, and then they both started with seizures as well. So they've both got severe epilepsy. So it's been challenging. It's hard work. It can be draining at times, but yeah, we've got used to it. You know, it can be up all through nights. That's just our life now. Myself and Paul. It's just. We've also fostered other children with additional needs, one that's had like cochlear implants, and we've had to go to the cochlear implant centre because she was deaf. Children obviously with different behavioural and other emotional problems. And we've done it for so long now, it's kind of just normal to us. We've fostered that many different type of children, sibling groups, boys and girls. It's just part of our life, it's just what we do now.
And I believe you're about to receive a rather special award in the Palace of Westminster. You might take a moment to blow your own trumpet on that one, please.
Yeah, so that came through a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, a British Citizens Award at the Palace of Westminster. And actually, Paul received one back in 2019, so it's just strange that we didn't get one together, because we've always done everything together. But Paul received his BCA in 2019, and then I'm getting mine on the 7th of July in London. So I know from Paul's that it's a really nice event. I think there's 25 people from across the country that have done different things over the years to help the communities, and this is a nice way to recognise them. You have like afternoon tea and a big celebration. You go around on an open top bus and see all the sights in London, and we're really looking forward to experiencing it again, because we already know that it's a really nice day.
Well, Michael Applebryce, this is the Great Britain segment of the show. Just like to take a pause every week to pay attention to those that are taking on and making the effort required, and in so doing, making lives better in so many different ways. We just try to, I need to remind myself as much as anything else that there are good people out there dedicating their lives, not just focused on their own needs, but those of others. So thank you very much for joining me this evening, and wish you and Paul all the very best. And I hope the day in Westminster lives up to expectations. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Splendid.
Well done, Michael.
Well done, Michael. Love it. OK, change of tone, though. The US Supreme Court last week overturned a 1973 ruling that had entitled women in all 50 states to legal abortions. Nearly 50 years after the landmark Roe v. Wade case, the matter of laws regarding abortion has been handed back to the individual states. In the words of Justice Samuel Alito, it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. Now, the subject could not be more sensitive. Feeling around the decision could not be running any higher. I'm going to discuss this one with Ingrid and Kerry. It's a difficult subject, Kerry. I'm going to just put it over to you and say, what do you make of the decision of the Supreme Court?
I think it's a disaster, and obviously there are women will find a way around it, just as in Britain before the 67 Act. You know, BPAS, for example, used to be the Birmingham Pregnancy Advisory Service, because it was busing women from the Midlands down to London to try and get abortion services before we legalised them. I'm very disappointed, because this takes us way back. And yes, you could say on the one hand, maybe it's better that, you know, it goes back to the democratically elected as opposed to legal enshrinement. But actually, I think progress would mean it isn't a legal issue at all. It's a matter for the individual women concerned and the women that are pregnant. No one else. It's not our business. And if we're serious about autonomy, as I know you are vis-à-vis children and the jab, we should be serious about women's ability to control their fertility. And I thought with the advent of the abortion pill, we'd got the last step of equality. You know, we're all the way there, and people should stop whinging about women's position, because that's it, we've got it. And we've just hit this, you know, about turn, which means in, probably 25 states, women will have to try and get the means to go over 500 miles to access abortion service. That's 35 million women are being denied. And the abortion pill is going to be criminalised as well.
Ingrid, Kerry raises, several interesting points there. It did strike me that so much of the pro-choice side of the argument was on the left of the political spectrum, which was also the side of the spectrum which was loudly calling for mandated vaccination and the rest in all but name. And I found it difficult to work out how you would square in your head bodily autonomy on the one hand for women seeking abortion, and yet still find it somehow possible to say that people should be held down and given a vaccine.
I know, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Why do you think both of those positions were coming from the same side of the spectrum?
Again, no choice. They're removing your ability to have that decision. I mean, I've vaguely looked into this because at the moment it is state to state and it isn't a blanket ruling that it's forbidden to have abortions, and so they're leaving it up to the individual states. It'll be quite interesting. I think Alabama straight away have gone with it. But also what kind of, it's the jab, yes, that comes into it, and now there's... But it brings into question euthanasia, because we have, it's been fought for a very long time. So you've got Dignitas. I know it's that you have to go through hoops and everything to get that. But again, it's making that choice about ending a life. OK, that's at the end of one's life, but also at the beginning, because actually, what sort of life will an unwanted child have? It could be awful, and there are so many aspects of a result of rape. Are there going to be genetic, very serious genetic problems that come through, and then the child will have a very compromised life? So many things. But, perhaps it should. I'm really against abortion, actually. In an ideal world, I would not want that, because it's from the moral aspect of it. But that's not to say that I'm absolutely against it, and you've got to have the baby no matter what. But there has to be perhaps a process, sort of like, why? What future is this child going to have? If it's going to be, why should a mother carry a child that she really doesn't want, to give it for adoption? That's not an answer either.
I sense from you very strongly how difficult it is to talk about this subject even now, which is interesting in and of itself. But Kerry, I wonder, and have wondered for a while, is this an instance where the difference, the cultural difference between, say, here in Great Britain and America is laid bare? We tend to think of America as being very like Britain, that we have so much in common, which we do. But, when it comes to things like gun laws, and now when it comes to the highly sensitive issue of abortion, it's a different place, isn't it? It's been subject to a different history. And there are different social mores at play there. And we have to look at what's happening in the American context, because it's not the same as abortion here.
Well, I think, you're right. It's not the same, thankfully, at the moment in Britain, although it does worry me, because quite often you'll find things that happen in America wend their way here and are highly influential. And if you look at what the Roe versus Wade defeat, turnaround represents, it's an attack on privacy. Now, that could have broader consequences, because the privacy of the woman to go through a termination, what other privacy are we talking about in terms of individual autonomy and rights and freedoms being undermined potentially too, which shouldn't overlook. And that we've seen here in terms of cancel culture and interference in people's lives. But in America, you have got, I think, a more religious society than we have in Britain anymore. We don't have that.
Except for Catholicism, because that's universal, isn't it?
Yeah, but we don't have huge Catholicism here or in America, actually. You'll find that it's not necessarily Catholics who are anti-abortion in America. There is a much more... It's seen as, you're God-fearing Republican if you're anti-abortion, and you're a mad lefty if you're pro-choice. I would say in Britain it's not a right-left issue at all, thankfully. I think we've got over the right-left thing, and we should just ditch it, because in truth we've got, you know, once you've got the technology in terms of a pill, you can't put the pill back in the bottle in terms of denying women a chance to make a choice about their future. You know, you're 16, you get accidentally pregnant. What are you saying to that kid? Life's over, you know.
And then you get the backstreet abortionists. I mean, wouldn't that?
I don't think we're going back to backstreets or anything like that. Even in America, I don't think that'll happen. I think people travel across states, and you know, you've got to understand that if you're a woman with an unwanted baby, it's a nightmare, absolute nightmare. And it shouldn't be doctors deciding, and it shouldn't be governors, and it shouldn't be Supreme Court lawyers, and it shouldn't be Trump or Biden, as far as I'm concerned. It's the woman herself.
I wonder if it isn't another demonstration of the unavoidable fact that there has to be nuanced consideration in all of these matters, and I think the instant polarisation and the shouting and the insult and the rage is probably not going to help. You know, it's another of those areas where there's a need for nuance, a need for compromise, and a need. That
might be true, Neil, but I'd be a bit careful about this obsession with division, because, you know, democracy is built on division and those ideas rubbing up against each other, having it out. Let's have it out and try and win people to our side. And I do worry that our concern about the shouting often means that we accept a lot of crap. And I'd like to see a little bit more shouting, and a little bit less acceptance of what is out there. And often, you know, when people say to me, we should discuss how we debate, I'm like, really? Or we should make the House of Commons calmer. Really? You know, I would like to see more people in this country getting their rocks off on things they're passionate about. Passion goes along. And don't worry about if you lose a few friends. So be it.
But we don't actually know how many people in America are opposed to this, men and women, because don't forget, it's not just women, it's men as well that have will have a very strong feeling about this, I would think. Not as much, perhaps, but, you know, we can't discount them. It'd be interesting to know what the statistics are on that.
There are men on women's side, there's no doubt. Always have
definitely.
Been.
Yes,
always
definitely.
have been.
That's
Very
what I'm
much
saying.
on women's
side.
side.
What they feel as well. So it'd be quite interesting to know the numbers.
A desperately emotive topic which we don't have anything like enough time for. But I think, you know, useful contributions made by you both. Thank you for you tackling what is a very difficult subject at a very high temperature time in that debate. Another break coming up, after which Prince Charles has been in Rwanda for the Commonwealth Summit, but what lies ahead for the monarchy when he becomes king? And would you fancy working in a lighthouse? We'll speak to people who do just that.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was, in fact, a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live. There's a definite coastal theme to tonight's episode. In the first half there, we considered second homers in Whitby. Now, I bring you news of a dream job for the sort of person that's drawn to the sound of the sea. Baker's Island Lighthouse off the coast of Salem, Massachusetts in the United States is shortly to be in need of a temporary caretaker and keeper. The lucky candidate for the summer of 2023 will need to be handy with the tools, able to maintain the property and attend to painting, lawn mowing and the upkeep of nearby trails. My next guests are Tara and Brian Flanagan, the present keepers of the light, and Annie Harris, CEO of Essex National Heritage, the non-profit group which runs the Lighthouse. I'm fascinated by this one. I'll make no bones about it. I have been connected to the Association of Lighthouse Keepers here in the UK for more years than I can contemplate. I've visited many lighthouses. Can I start perhaps with Tara and Brian? Simply, what's it been like? What's it been like living the lighthouse dream?
Amazing. We have just been offered 4+ years of amazing views, meeting people, living history out here. It honestly, Neil, it never gets old. I've taken thousands of pictures, probably all from the same spot, and everyone's just a little different because every day we wake up, the clouds are different, the sky's different, the grass is greener than the other day. Honestly, I would go with Brian. I think it's been an amazing experience, one that we'll never forget. And we really hope whoever takes over for us has as much fun out here.
Well, we're just looking at images there. It looks absolutely, oh my goodness, it looks absolutely extraordinary. Is it an isolated location? Is it somewhere that people would need to be good with their own company or with a limited social circle, let's say?
Actually, it's not isolated. There's other people that live on the island. We're approximately 20 miles from Boston. And we have visitors every week on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, including working with volunteers on Wednesdays. So really, we're around people all the time, except for the Monday and Tuesday when we kind of like our own time.
Yeah. So we, on our off time, we live on a 38-foot sailboat. So Brian and I, for the past 8+ years, have really gotten used to just being the two of us in small areas. So having almost 11 acres to live on and care for is a dream for us.
Can I ask a question? I'm just, Kerry here, who's one of my studio guests this evening, has a question. Yes, go ahead, Kerry.
It looks absolutely idyllic. There's no doubt about it. But I understand that you're not paid for doing the upkeep. I know, I mean, I grew up on a farm and I upkeep a centre now, which is a lot of work. But can you manage to also do a job and do all this work for nothing?
Yes, so we are volunteers for Essex National Heritage Commission. Brian and I each volunteer about 40 hours a week doing upkeep. But I can vouch for myself that I have worked remotely for the Annapolis boat shows in Maryland since we started here in 2018. So as long as you're creative with your work schedule and you are really good at managing time, if you're okay volunteering, but just remember, we are paid living in an amazing house with 10.5 acres that have probably the best view of the ocean and Salem Sound than anywhere in New England. So we are paid for living and boat.
Annie Harris, if I can come to you, for Essex Lighthouse Trust, what kind of person are you looking for? I know that Brian and Tara are taking a block of time off. what would be your ideal applicant? What qualities and character traits do they need?
Well, we would be happy if they could duplicate themselves, but we're looking for people that really enjoy the possibility. There is certainly hard work in terms of maintenance and mowing, but people that enjoy welcoming people to the island. We have visitors, we have campers, we have school groups, and just find really pleasure in talking about the place and enjoying it. And certainly Brian and Tara we have had some other keepers before them. And they're usually a mix of people that are very curious and energetic and love to try out new places and share them with people.
Does the job require any looking after of the light itself, or is it a fully automated light installation that takes care of itself?
It's an automated light. It's still maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard. Essex Heritage owns all the buildings, including the lighthouse tower, but the U.S. Coast Guard does take care of the light, make sure it's still shining.
Tara and Brian, again to you, what is it exactly that has persuaded you to walk away from this idyll, and is it only a temporary hiatus?
When Essex Heritage first contacted us in 2018 to take over for the summer caretakers who had abruptly gave notice, we had planned on sailing our boat to Maine and Nova Scotia for the summer. And we agreed to come out here as a stopgap to help them until they found their next caretakers. And within a day, we knew we were going to be here for a while. So pretty much we have worked for the last 4+ summers doing all the big building construction projects, putting the new solar array that lights both houses, building trails, repairing pretty much everything, building a campground. So we really think next year, and we had spoken to Annie saying we think 5 years will get us to the point where a true caretaker position will be here. We think it's time for us to sail to Maine and Nova Scotia.
Well, yet another adventure awaits you both. Tara and Brian Flanagan, it's been lovely meeting you and hearing about a lifestyle that I've dreamt about off and on over the years for as long as I can remember. And to Annie Harris, CEO of Essex National Heritage, thank you for your time as well this evening. I will think about dropping you a line forthwith. It's quite a prospect. What do you think, Ingrid?
I could do that.
Could you do that?
I really could. And I know I could because I kind of do that. Every time I go to Norway, it's quite cut off. Didn't have a phone, actually, for a long, long time. Didn't have running water for a long time, so you had to walk down to a natural well and come back with the buckets up the hill with a full bucket. And then fish, live off the land, everything. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I'm going to Norway this summer for about 7 weeks to this summer house. It's right on the fjord. And I know every day is different. It looks the same picture. And I've got millions, just like this couple. I take pictures and pictures, and it's like they're all exactly the same, but they're actually never not. And I can do it. I can really do it. I'm very good. I'm a chameleon. But I love that. I love being close to nature, waking up to that beautiful fresh air, the sea smells, and it's just fantastic. So I know I could do it.
Kerry, are you a town mouse or a country mouse? Could you be off grid?
I grew up on a farm, but my fantasy has always been a flat in Soho with coffee bars and croissants out the front and a field with horses and forest out the back.
Okay.
I've always wanted the best of both worlds, and I'm a people person, so I wouldn't want to live remotely. I wouldn't have a problem with doing any of the maintenance or the hard labour or the work, but I'm a social person. I'd want the company and the politics and the people around. But maybe they're only 20 miles from civilization, actually. They're not far away.
Well, let's not forget, they clearly had a Wi-Fi connection that enabled them to take part in this
Exactly.
conversation.
So I'd go for it, Neil. You could be out there.
Yeah, I think I have felt, and I know that from talking to people, so many people have felt in the last while that urge to make a run for it.
They have more and more. I mean, talking in communes. That's the thing, not just making a run for it and just being in isolation, but actually forming great big communes with people that feel that they really want to escape as well, escape from society, not hear this horrible negative news and just... it's not burying your head in the sand, it's actually just living in an alternative life, almost a parallel universe that's free, and I could do that too, easily.
The commune thing sounds... I've read too much about the kind of 60s commune horror stories that all end up kind of behaviour control and absolute nightmare. But I love the idea. I've always thought, especially given the inadequacy of care for the elderly, which is so bad in this country, you know, the more people and families and friends and networks that could set up their own, you know, I don't know, a housing estate where you can grow old with like-minded people and teach the young
Don't you think
at the same time?
For a lot of people, dissatisfaction with the institutions, with the education system, with, I don't know, the National Health Service, all of it, might prompt more and more people to seek alternative society? I mean, it sounds outlandish, but maybe more and more groups will just turn their backs on what's going on and seek alternative ways of living, you know, out of sight, away from the madding crowd, and get themselves back to a version of life that makes more sense to them.
I can absolutely see that. And if we go all digital and, you know, no hard cash, we'll go back to the barter system. So we'll be growing things and going sort of like, I'll give you a pound of potatoes for whatever. Do you know what I mean?
I spent too much time in the developing world seeing people living a semi-subsistence life to wish that on anybody. It's called poverty, but I want to see more people actually try and change society and change the way it is rather than run away from it or escapism. Because then what?
What if you can't change society? I mean, we are fighting this horrible wheel that is grinding us all down all the time. And I know it sounds like a cop-out and you're running away and everything, but, you know, we are not this... We are entering into a very new, I think, type of world existence. I call it existence because I don't think it's going to be the life that we ever knew before, with our freedoms taken away so much. You know, what about that kind of choice of it? It's not living in poverty, this is choice. Other people do live in poverty and they have to be self-sustaining and they can't because of the climate and they've got so much against them. But I'm talking about sort of like us here now in a Western world where we have got the privileges of a good climate and so on. I don't
Ingrid,
think it's running away.
I hear you. I think I can feel that. I can feel that call definitely to get away from certain things and remind myself that another kind of life is possible. OK, moving on. There was controversy recently when it was reported that Prince Charles had described plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda as, quote, appalling. While Clarence House declined to comment on the supposed remark, the official statement said the Prince was, quote, politically neutral. Last week, HRH was in Rwanda for the summit of Commonwealth Prime Ministers and Presidents and spoke there at the opening ceremony about how whether or not to retain Her Majesty the Queen as head of state was a matter for each member country to decide. His Royal Highness also spoke about slavery and his personal journey of discovery to deepen his own understanding of slavery's impact. GB News' royal reporter Cameron Walker has more.
Friendship, loyalty, and a desire for freedom and peace. Her Majesty the Queen's vision for a Commonwealth which bears no resemblance to the empires of the past. 70 years later, her son Charles accepts that countries who still have a British sovereign as their head of state may want to choose a different path.
Each member's constitutional arrangement, as republic or monarchy, is purely a matter for each member country to decide. Arrangements such as these can change calmly and without rancour.
There was no apology from the heir to the throne for the royal family's historic role in the transportation of East African slaves to the Americas, whose ancestors now debate republicanism versus royalty. Instead, the prince decided to acknowledge the wrongs and urged Commonwealth leaders to do the same. Earlier this week, Prince Charles came face to face with the grim reality of the 1994 genocide against Tutsis in Rwanda. Rows of skulls, belonging to some of the estimated 800,000 victims. And it was Eric Marangwa's suggestion, a survivor of the genocide, who encouraged Charles to visit the memorial and reconciliation village. Eric thinks the prince's visit will help more people understand what happened and how Rwanda's rebuilding.
It's a very important action to us Rwandans, particularly survivors, but it's also a very important message to the rest of the world. It will help people to understand more about Rwanda and to appreciate how far this country has come.
The Prince represented the Queen yesterday and met Prime Minister Boris Johnson for a meeting that lasted just 15 minutes. The elephant in the room? Prince Charles's reported comments where he branded the government's scheme to send asylum seekers to Rwanda appalling. Prince Charles will one day succeed his mother as head of the Commonwealth and as head of state. And a source close to the Prince says just as with meetings with the Queen, what the Prime Minister and the Prince of Wales discuss is private. Clarence House previously stressed the Prince remains politically neutral. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Kerry, winds of change, let's say, blowing through the Commonwealth, different attitudes, just one of many challenges facing the royal family and the firm. Do you see a future for the constitutional monarchy in the years ahead?
Definitely not. I think it's a feudal relic anyway. I mean, I think this sort of turn by Charles is based on a raised recognition that, you know, the monarchy's days are numbered across the Caribbean, at least, maybe not everywhere. And this has been a long time coming in terms of people being politically independent. I mean, that's not to say countries might not want to be part of the Commonwealth with or without, you know, the Queen or Charles or whoever as sovereign. But in terms of, you know, real independence and democracy, I think in swathes of the world where the Commonwealth basically was the sort of ancestor or the carry-on from the colonial past, I think, you know, the monarchy's over. And I mean, I've got a lot of sympathy for the Queen because at least she's kept her nose out. But I think I have no sympathy whatsoever for the man who talks to plants and has spent his time meddling in politics behind the scenes for a very long time. And while I disagree with the Rwanda policy, because a right load of fibs are being told about Rwanda, I don't think it's any of Charles's business. It's a matter of democracy.
What do you think, Ingrid? I tend to agree that it looks as if, for all the talk of political neutrality, Charles is champing at the bit to get involved in ways that his mother never did.
How can you be neutral when you say this is rubbish, this is nonsense, this is appalling? That is not being neutral. You don't say anything at all. You don't. So his bias is he's not happy about this. I do adore Charles. I love the fact that he talks to plants. I hug trees, but not in a hippie, hairy armpit way. I just...
That's good. I'm relieved, Ingrid. It's not in a hippie, hairy way.
But he's got a lot of feeling and passion, and sometimes it is actually misguided and misdirected. Sometimes I think he's being a little bit too politically correct. I don't think he should apologise for slavery, because I think we have to just acknowledge that this was something that happened way, way, way back. And if we could repeat history here and now, it wouldn't happen. But we have to move away from that. So, but I don't like that he's... the Queen, as you said, she's kept her nose clean. She hasn't got involved in politics. And I don't think he should as well. I think already we've got a problem with Boris and the things that he's saying. We're not agreeing with it. And then for now Prince Charles to not agree with what Boris has done as well, it's so unsettling. You know, we've just got to be a little bit more focused and a bit more united, I think, on what we're doing. And we didn't vote for this either. This wasn't our choice. And I am a bit concerned about... I've been to Rwanda, and I went not long after, not when the memorial was there. It was literally when the churches where they stormed and they hid in the churches, there was still blood on the walls. You still saw the shoes. They're hidden in there. They're taking their little books, and you can see that sort of like they've just been completely abandoned, the little cups that they had, the plates that they had. And all the skulls were lined up in this rickety shed. It was absolutely horrendous. But they had such dignity, these people. You know, the average age of the household then, after all the men and women was killed, was something like 12 years old. And they had to bring up their younger siblings. And I went out there with War Child, and it was to teach them to be self-sufficient, so how to have hives and harvest the honey. But other things like cutting hair, shaving, making clothes, so that they could just live off the land and survive. I mean, they are so dignified. But I think actually it's a big mistake, because there's going to be a lot of people that they don't know what their history is. You could get a load of criminals and terrorists going in there.
But in any event, I think to claim, for Prince Charles to claim political neutrality...
that's rubbish.
I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
After the break, we're on to another couple living an extraordinary life. Abby Murray will be here to tell us about how she and her partner walked away from all in favour of a life in a converted Ford Transit van. Coming up.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. And now, as if one dangle idyllic lifestyle wasn't enough for one show, here's another idea to whet your appetite, those who've had enough of what's going on at home. A Scottish couple are turning their backs on bricks and mortar in favour of life on the road. David Montgomery and Abby Murray bought a builder's van, second-hand van, and taught themselves the skills needed to convert it into a chic and cosy home. Now the pair are off on their travels into Europe and then perhaps beyond. I thought it was just going to be Abby, but there's David as well. You both joining me. Lovely. It looks pretty idyllic already, Abby Murray and David Montgomery. Are you on your travels already, or are you still in your back garden?
So we actually converted the van back in 2017, 2018. We were spent about 12 months converting it. And we've been on quite a few trips now in the past 5 years, at one point living in it for, I think, close to 2 years straight. At the moment, we do also have a flat as well. We're not living in it full time at the moment, but we are just back from quite a long trip down to the Pyrenees on the Catalonia coast in south of France.
Talk me through, Abby. Talk me through your thinking. What persuaded you that the normal life, in your flat or whatever, wasn't quite hitting all your targets? What persuaded you that a more mobile life was appealing?
Yeah, well, we originally actually just went on a 6-week trip across to Europe, and then we got rid of our flat and everything to do it. And then when we were on the road, we just decided that when we did come back, we were just going to not bother renting a place again and just stay in it. Just, we loved it so much. It was so fun. Yeah, it was more by choice than that. Yeah, that we didn't want to have a flat. There was so much adventure and so cozy, and everything we needed was in the one space. It was nice to be a bit more like minimalist and not have as much stuff as well. So it just really appealed to us a lot.
Oh, we're looking at some photographs, and I have to say, you don't really need to sell it. The van, the vehicle itself, and the backdrops. Goodness me! So talk us through from memory. What are some of those locations that we're looking at here?
So a lot of that is in the Alps, the Dolomites. Especially on our first trip, we went what feels like everywhere. I think I saw one of our favourite locations, which was above a ski lift in the Dolomites. We just stumbled across a dirt track. We were looking for a place to stay for the night. We just kept going and going, and got to the top of a mountain, and we were sitting watching the sunset and listening to wolves thousands of feet below us in the trees howling all night. It was quite an experience.
So I'm not sure if I've picked up quite. Are you going to cut all ties with bricks and mortar? Is there going to come a day where your home is your van, or are you going to keep some kind of connection to a rooted existence?
Well, I mean, at the moment we still have businesses that we run in the UK. We are thankful that we now live in an age where we can do so much of that on the road already. Mm-hmm. If we ever moved on from that, I think there's a good chance we would just go with no plans of coming back, at least for a period of time.
When you're out doing what you're doing, do you encounter others on the road who are doing the same thing? Is there a kind of an unknown community out there living the dream?
Yeah, there's actually there's a huge van life community now. I think because of Instagram and YouTube and everything, there's just so many people. Especially now, it's massive. Everyone's doing it now. Yeah, it feels like.
We certainly weren't the first to do this. I think people have probably been converting vans since the 1960s. But I think, like Abby said, in the last few years, it's become a much more popular decision and much more popular lifestyle choice.
I don't know if you've encountered or run across either the book or the film Nomad Land, the film with Frances McDormand, about in America there's a complete counterculture of people who, to be honest, mostly because of financial difficulties, they let go of their mortgages or their rented accommodation, and they transform their lives. They move their lives into vans, and off they go. And they do seasonal work. A lot of them build it around the big Amazon, distribution depots. So they pick up casual work. I wonder if as you're saying, the world might be changing. Societal moves might be encouraging all sorts of people to turn away from the conventional life and find other ways of doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. I think especially with so many crises with housing and trying to get onto the property ladder, there are a lot of people out there that are looking for alternatives, and it's a huge benefit being able to travel, but also not having to pay for rent at the same time, having everything on your back. And it's, I would say, one of the cheapest ways to travel, especially if you're visiting as many places as you can do in a van.
I've got guests here in the studio with me, Kerry and Ingrid. Kerry has made it plain she has a question for you. So
well, I just actually wanted to commend you two, because I've seen your videos on YouTube. They actually produce fantastic film, Neil, of their travels, because they've been at it for quite a few years now. And my question is, where are you heading next? And what do you want to do with the film?
Yeah, well, the YouTube stuff is actually really new. We've only just very recently started the channel. And if you fancy subscribing, Neil, you're more than welcome to. We'd love to have you along for the journey. But I think our next plans were possibly Italy.
Yeah, like the Amalfi Coast we'd love to do. We've also talked about doing Norway. We'd love to go up to Norway.
Yeah, I think it was Norway was already mentioned early on in the show, and that'd be a fantastic place to visit. And some of the scenery up there is incredible.
And we always just decide last minute just to go as well. So
yeah.
Quite often we don't plan it, and we just get on the ferry over to Europe and then get the map out and decide where to go from there.
Yeah, so that's another huge benefit, isn't it, of having the van, is you don't need to worry about booking accommodation and organising flights. You can just go, and there's ferries across the channel every day, so you can afford to be a bit more spontaneous.
Yeah.
Well, Abby and David, I have to say, I mean, even the shot you've set up in your van, you know, you're both bathed in a kind of golden light. Everything about it is just saying we should all contemplate different ways of doing things. So I wish you both safe travels, and 1,000 thanks for taking the time out this evening to give us this glimpse of another life. Thanks very much, and travel well.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks. Bye.
It is lovely, isn't it?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it makes me think again of what you were saying about your Norwegian holiday home and that desire to be away and to live again in that freer way.
Absolutely. What's incredible is David's 30 and Abby's 27, but that's now. But they started building this a few years ago, so it's very young to sort of have the wanderlust, really, you know. It's, you know, of course, the student and gap year student, everything, but I think it's fantastic, a living dream. But it's a choice, but they are in a very privileged position. I don't know what their business is, but they did say that they had that, so they could afford to do that.
Kerry, it's true, isn't it? I think because of technology, basically, and also because there are other economic pressures on people that maybe weren't there 20, 40 years ago, the difficulty to get on the housing ladder. But the fact remains there are other ways to live for those that can, for those that have the skills and have the open mind to take them on.
Yeah, of course, there are other ways to live, and well done to these two, and always good to inspire people to try new stuff. And I think the good thing about these two is that they've developed the skills to be able to go beyond being stuck in a flat they can't afford. And they didn't have a lot of money, actually. And you can move around and be somewhere else and make a living.
Isn't it? It's a different
They spent $7,000 on the van and then about $7,000 doing it up over... Now, that's not bad. Now, not everyone's got $7,000 to hand. And if you're in London, I had a big old 4x4 diesel. I'd love to have done that with it. But the ULEZ and the Mayor of London meant that can't even drive it around.
We're going to have to park the dream and move on. Thank you both. That's all from me and Neil Oliver Live. Thanks as always to my panel, Ingrid Tarrant, Kerry Dingle. Next up, it's Ministry of Offence, and we can all keep dreaming the dream.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a